My name is Rhiannon Giddens. This is Francesco Turisi, and we are musicians and also cultural historians. We have done a lot of research and looking into how the movement of history reflects itself in the cultural pieces that we leave behind as people. And it's a pleasure to be participating in the 2021 America's Cultural Summit. The overall themes of this year's conference really resonate with me. And so I would like to thank the International Federation of Arts Councils and Culture Agencies and National Endowment for the Arts for the invitation. We're going to be doing a song that I wrote, and it's one that came to me while I was sort of in lockdown in Ireland last summer during all the protests that were happening in the United States after the death of George Floyd. And I was just kind of thinking about the history of America and getting pretty, I don't know, pretty upset. And this song kind of came out of me contemplating, the hundreds of years of history that I've been sort of documenting with my music, for a while now. And the beginning of the piece that we're going to do is actually a scrap of music from the 1700s that was written down by free men of color and was from people of African descent in the New World. Some of the earliest notated music from people of African descent in the New World. So I just like to preface the song with that. It's called Coromantì number 2, and then it'll go into the song that I wrote called Build a House. Thank you so much, and I wish you the best of luck with the conference, and I look forward to participating.
Welcome to the second day of the Americas Cultural Summit 2021. My name is Magdalena Moreno Mujica and I'm the Executive Director of Ithaca. I am a female of average height, I have olive skin and curly brown hair. I have a white jacket on with a black top, and behind me is a bookshelf full of cultural objects and books that are dear to me. I am on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respects to all First Nations people that are with us today and throughout the summit. My cultural heritage is of south and center of Chile, and I will now once again continue in my mother tongue of Spanish. Primero quisiera agradecer la cautivante presentación de Ryan Gires, hilvanando sutilmente lo contemporáneo con el pasado, lo ancestral, narrando historias que informan nuestros presentes y nos guían hacia el futuro. Ayer comenzamos nuestra trayectoria de diálogo en estos días con diversas miradas para abordar la agenda de equidad. Hoy el enfoque se torna a la sostenibilidad y la justicia social, que tienen muchas aristas. La plenaria abordará 3 enfoques críticos que se entrelazan al enfrentar los desafíos para una agenda sostenible y justa. Primero, la cosmovisión de pueblos originarios. Segundo, los derechos culturales y humanos. Y tercero, la viabilidad y el rol de los sectores cultural y creativo en esta co-construcción. Luego del panel de respuesta que nutrirá este diálogo, comenzaremos las mesas de trabajo para escuchar sus visiones. En esta co-construcción, parte fundamental de esta Cumbre Cultural de las Américas. Ahora es un profundo honor darle la palabra a la Secretaria del Interior de los Estados Unidos, la Honorable Deb Haaland. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much.
Gwazi Haupa. Good morning, esteemed colleagues, leaders, and friends. I'm Deb Haaland, Secretary of the United States Department of the Interior and proud member of the Pueblo of Laguna. I'm grateful to the National Endowment for the Arts and the International Federation of Arts Councils and Culture Agencies for inviting me to speak at this year's Americas Cultural Summit. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I am joining you from the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Anacostan and Piscataway people here in Washington, D.C. Many may think that land acknowledgements are a new custom, but it actually dates back centuries in many Native nations and communities. Land acknowledgements recognize Indigenous peoples who are the original stewards of the lands where we live and work. As the globe faces the existential threat that climate change poses, the recognition of the Indigenous stewards of our land, air, and water, and the theme of this conference could not be more relevant. Towards a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive future. This theme resonates strongly with our mission at the Department of the Interior and President Biden's goals for the United States in this pivotal moment. I'll start by giving a brief overview of how we at the U.S. Department of the Interior can be a partner in creating that future. Unlike many countries' Ministry of the Interior, the United States Department of the Interior has a mission that is in common with other countries' ministries of environment, climate, natural resources, science, indigenous affairs, and culture. Our department's roles on culture and nature are deeply interconnected. In fact, part of our mission is to protect the nation's natural resources and cultural heritage. Through efforts such as the World Heritage Program, the department works in partnership with other countries to preserve and share our nation's and the world's cultural and natural heritage. This heritage, in turn, supports the arts. The arts, like culture, build on, learn from, and react to history of people and places. Heritage is an essential resource for living cultures and human identity. As the first Native American Cabinet Secretary for the United States, my deep respect for nature is grounded in my cultural upbringing. I welcome the recognition in this summit that sustaining our cultural resources and creativity is key to ensuring we can tackle our world's most pressing challenges. Identification, preservation, management, and sharing of our cultural heritage on public lands helps tell the story of the nation. It's my goal to make sure we're telling the story of the United States by preserving cultural sites that reflect all perspectives, including communities that have been underrepresented in the past, and making sure that we build on, learn from, and react to what came before. We help give those communities a voice. We retell and elevate their stories, and in many cases help people understand hardship and the origins of inequity. These special places can make people feel, laugh, and cry. These special places can make people care. It is by acknowledging every community's truth and every community's history that we can take bold action where we recognize inequities and move toward a future that values all of us. It's something that is deeply ingrained in who I am as a person and how I lead. In my culture and in many indigenous cultures around the world, we are taught at a very young age that our actions impact not just ourselves, but our entire community and thus future generations. When anyone in our community is struggling, we know it's a signal that we need to work harder to understand those struggles, and we see it as our obligation to help. At Interior, we can help people learn about the struggles of those who came before us and have an opportunity to instill in others the sense of obligation to our neighbors and people who we may not even know. That deep understanding grounds much more of the work we do at Interior, but none can be more pressing than the climate crisis. Right now, we're in a pivotal moment in which communities across the globe are facing harsher storms, longer droughts, more intense fires, and extreme heat and cold caused by climate change. A pivotal moment that calls on us to recognize that climate change impacts every person on this planet, but not every person on this planet has the same access to life-saving resources or the ability to relocate when disaster strikes. Entire communities and cultures are at risk of being lost to the perils of climate change. In the United States, as is the case elsewhere, villages in Alaska and island communities in the Pacific are being forced to relocate from their ancestral homelands. The natural resources that have sustained indigenous peoples for centuries in forests, grasslands, rivers, coral reefs, and other natural habitats are being destroyed by extreme weather events and climatic shifts. Cultural traditions are being irrevocably altered in the face of climate change. Communities that have been marginalized throughout history face some of the most devastating impacts. We have a president who not only recognizes the inequities that exist, but is showing through action that we are ready to lead the world toward a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive future. The cultural heritage of our country, including the dark pages from our history books, informs our policies and understanding as we move forward and gives us a lens for equity as we strive to build back better than before. At the department, we're committed to being your partner in preserving cultural resources now and for future generations. Thank you.
Culture is both an enabler and a driver of the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. We know and accept that culture is defined as a set of beliefs, morals, methods, and a collection of human knowledge, and its sustainability for one generation to the next is really dependent on the transmission of these to the younger generations. As such, Let us affirm that cultural sustainability must be regarded as a fundamental issue and even a precondition to be met on the path to sustainable development. This means examining the best practices for bringing culture into political and social policy, as well as practical domains, and developing means and indicators for assessing the impacts of culture on sustainable development. Basically, social sustainability means fulfilling human needs, basic needs like food, clothing, housing, and ensuring that there is justice, healthcare, education, peace, and guaranteed human rights to secure future generations. As such, social and cultural sustainability is really all about people's opportunities to fulfill their potential. Depending on where in the world we live and at what stage we are in our lives, our needs are different. These needs may concern freedom of religion or finding balance in a life in an industrialized society. For others, social sustainability might concern access to education or simply to live in peace. To discuss these crucial issues, our Canadian Senator Michelle Tyner-Audette, founder and CEO of Earth Angel Emily O'Brien of the United States, and UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Culture, Ernesta Otone, who is from Chile.
Kwe kesnoit the shek to bohoga the Northern Dan Quebec City. Ni bohoga doti no te siwa ude la nation Huron-Wendat, les Atikamekw, les Inuits, les Malécites, mak les Abénaquis. In my language, I wanted to acknowledge the people of this land, many beautiful nations that are walking here for thousands of years, here in Quebec City. Of course, the great nation Huron-Wendat, the Atikamekw, the Malécite, the Abénaquis, and the Innu Nation. Thank you for welcoming me here. I want to say also thank you for this invitation. And one of your questions was, as nation developing sustainable agenda to meet target towards a more sustainable future, here how I would respond to that, or I would share from my heart, of course, my point of view, of course. So from the Innu Nation and Quebecois Nation, my mom is Innu from Ouashatmak-Malitinan. It's northeast of Quebec, down below Labrador. And my dad is Quebecois, one of the most beautiful Quebecois, if he's not the most beautiful. Very blessed to have those two parents. But also blessed to be a mom of 5 beautiful children and a grandmother of 2 boys. Not long ago, I was newly appointed as senator for the Senate of Canada. But also, I guess, what is natural for me, probably people would know me more as an advocate for Indigenous women and girls here in Canada. I was privileged and honored to be one of the commissioners for the National Inquiry for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. It was a journey that I will never forget. And very, very, keep this in my heart, honored every day. But also, I believe that the truth is the path for healing or to repair the unrepairable, maybe some would say, but also to repair a broken relationship or to start a new relationship. And then we can talk about reconciliation. I would say I would talk about reconciliation if we remember the past and repair all of that. But also, I'm an advocate, and it's natural and very, very important for me to advocate for equity, equality, justice, but of course, social justice. For many, many, many moons, thousands of moons, I would say, First people, Indigenous people, our knowledge, way of life, way of living, our language, the culture, our ceremonies have survived and are still living today. But I cannot say all our ceremonies, because the colonial violence or the violence that we face over the century took away a lot of our history or knowledge or ceremony. But also at the same time, I have to be honest to say, I see emerging more and more youth or elders are coming back and say, we used to do this or we used to do that. Now let's take back this and making sure that we honor our ceremony. But it's also a place where the teaching was coming from my mom, my people, the Innu people, but also from many, many other nations across Turtle Island, that we have an interconnection with the land and all the elements on this Mother Earth. Could be the fire, the water, the air, the stars, the animal, the insect, the fish, all of that. We have an interconnection. We have an interdependence, but also the reciprocity. And most of all, we have to respect all that relationship that we have with what I mentioned. But the beauty or the strength also is it's what making us a nation or an indigenous person or an indigenous nation among other nations. Why? I found out or I learned or the teaching was and still today that it's also the foundation of our rights as Innu people or Anishinaabe or Giksan. It's that reciprocity, interconnection, interdependence, but also the respect. Hey, that's our law. That's our responsibility, but also duty, because it's who we are. But also when we come to 2021, okay, when we talk about the question you asked about what do we do to achieve those targets, if I come with the lens of Western science lens, and I come to a territory or to a nation, I'll see that the nation might fail or is failing when we talk about sustainability or sustainability development or what is the agenda amongst the indigenous people to protect and so on and so on. But let's redo that same exercise, but in another way where it's the lens of the indigenous people, the lens of the nation or the group or the movement from that region. I think if we were listened long time ago and understood and respected and of course recognized, I'm sure people would understand when we say the water has a right like a person has a right. And I'll come back on this later. Everything is alive for us. Everything has a purpose and everything has its place in that circle or that holistic approach that we have to respect and back and forth. So coming from a place not long ago, the Mushwanapi, it's way up north, and it's the 56th parallel up north in Canada, Quebec, I would say. It's a place for me where it's my school of life, but also a place where I reconnect with my past because it was taken away by the church, by the residential school or day school, or by a system or too many systems. It's a place also where I know for thousands of years, the Innu Nation, the Niskapi, the Cree people who went to that place left some evidence that we were there and we are still there today. Evidence sometimes that we will find in museum. Some will say it's a piece of art, but it was a tool to work on the caribou, on the skin, or to work on specific things around on that land. So for me, it's not a piece of art, but a piece of evidence that everything is interconnected, where it makes me, as an Innu person, it tells me, voici ma preuve, here my evidence of who I was and who I am today. But also making sure that when people or institution or state or organization will create some ways of how do we achieve those targets on sustainable development, or any agenda around that, if we don't include the indigenous knowledge, the indigenous science, or the people from that land, no matter where they live, they're still connected to that land. If we don't involve them or include them, there'll be two agendas. One will say they're failing, and the other one will say, oh my God, they never listen. So at the end of the day, everybody's failing. What we're capable to say today, when we combine the Western science and the indigenous science, the result is powerful. Very, very powerful. And it's a way also to have a safe space, or I urge, or I hope, not urge, but I hope that if I stand to protect something and I become vocal, I hope we have a safe space and we are protected to say what we think or what we are demanding when we talk about, let's say, the land on this case. And where I want to conclude is, when I talk about a safe space, if a young woman like Autumn Peltier is telling us that the water, I want to quote her well, let me get her quote, her message. Our water deserves to be treated as human, with human rights. We need to acknowledge our water with personhood so we can protect our water. For me and for many of us, it's the same when we talk about the caribou. It's the same when we talk about our remains that are in the museum, or our tools or jacket or piece of cloth that are in the museum that they say it's a piece of art, where for us, no, we want this back, or we want to say we have to treat this as we are treating a human person. That relationship with that spirit is very important and very powerful. So I hope this America's Cultural Summit will remind the rest of the world, and of course Canada, that we cannot separate the indigenous knowledge in any way or any place. It's very transversal. I don't know in English, sorry about that. We're everywhere, or everything affects us. But when we're involved, when we participate, or when we're shaking an agenda, of course, we see an important change or an important result, I would say positive. So I wish you a great summit, a great debate or dialogue, but let's not forget, it's not something isolated. Oh, there's a little group there. No, we're part of this huge circle, and we will continue to be part, or we will impose ourselves to make sure that when we talk about sustainable development, the indigenous knowledge is part of the agenda. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily O'Brien. I'm a Caucasian woman with brown reddish hair, and I'm wearing a dark green blouse with white floral printing on it, and I have a plant and window in my background. As someone who works in the intersection of sustainability and the creative sectors, I have to say that the role that diverse communities play in the sustainable agenda conversation is absolutely vital. The most marginalized are, without a doubt, the most vulnerable from the threats of climate change, and thus have to be centered in these conversations. There's also a really important element of the creative sector and the jobs that exist in the creative sector, and how more often than not, those jobs are considered positions of privilege or require a certain level of privilege in order to attain those jobs. So making the creative and cultural sector more attainable in terms of career paths for diverse communities is really important, so that the stories that are being told are not the same homogenous stories over and over again, but that we're hearing a diversity of voices and perspectives, because that is really the key to helping us unlock a new vision of the future. I think what we've seen over and over again in terms of the glaring science around the climate issue for decades now is, the science is there. More often than not, the technology is there to convert to renewable energy and so forth. But what we really need to start to think about is, how do we shift culture? How do we change the fabric of which our economies and societies are currently operating off of, which is, of course, a very tall order. And I think no one can deny the power of storytelling when it comes to shifting culture. This is important right now because the science is telling us this is the decade of action. This is our decade to ensure we don't cross the threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius in global temperature rising. And it's really our last chance to save millions of lives from, who are at risk from natural disasters, precious species, and biodiversity. So the cultural and creative sectors have a really, really vital role to play in reimagining our sustainable future. Like many social issues, climate change is also a humanitarian crisis. We are absolutely in a crisis. Whether you are someone who has that crisis knocking at your front door every day, or maybe you have the privilege of it not affecting you on a day-to-day basis, it will affect everyone in some shape or form. When it comes to ensuring cultural, artistic, environmental diversity thrive, I think that really boils down to the concept of radical imagination, which is a concept by Adrienne Marie Brown. She's a US author and social movement organizer. And really, Adrienne talks about the power that visionary fiction has to change the world. The way I like to think about it is, a lot of the stories that have been told are not necessarily shifting us quick enough into the future that we all desire. And so how can we harness creative storytelling to really help us envision and reimagine a completely new world? Because at the end of the day, this is how revolutionary change starts. This is where it all begins. And so we can't envision a thriving global society without a diversity of voices represented. So I think the film industry is making strides in this way. There is a lot of progress being made, such as the inclusion standards that films now have to meet in order to qualify for the Academy Awards, different funds and programs that are now in place in order for diverse filmmakers to produce their work, to get the support that they need, to get the visibility that they need, to have their stories be told, to even the diversity of content that's now being presented to audience due to new streaming platforms breaking barriers around what types of content is distributed where. I think we have so much at our fingertips now due to these new technologies that allow us to access worlds and cultures and things that we would have never otherwise been able to access. So I think in terms of local, international policies, I think these are the types of things we need to be looking at, right? How can we take some of the cultural institutions that already have, let's say, prestige or decision-making authority, and how can they start to embed diversity and inclusion standards into the work that they're doing, as well as sustainability standards too? And how can we use incentives, funds, awareness, etc., to promote the artists who are creating amazing climate narratives and are uplifting diverse voices? I think a vital thing to remember when it comes to the social justice discussion and how that relates to climate is a statistic from Erica Chenoweth, a political scientist at Harvard. She writes that it only takes 3.5% of the population to bring about political change. 3.5%. That's astounding when I read that. It gave me so much hope when I learned that, it doesn't take the majority even. If enough people start to create a foundation of individual practice, this is how social change builds and grows. One of the important things that we need to keep in mind when it comes to sustaining the social justice conversation is psychological and emotional resilience for those who are on the front lines. There are so many incredible activists, artists, groups who are doing phenomenal work, many of whom you're hearing from at today's summit. And I think that supporting them and their work that they're doing so that they can sustain their work, amplifying them so that we don't reinvent the wheel when there are plenty of organizations, community leaders, indigenous groups who have been doing this work for years and years and years, but might just need that level of awareness in order to sustain it, or whatever that might be. So the activist community really, really needs us to help sustain the social justice movements that they've been so phenomenal at creating, and not just in performative ways, but in financial ways. And how can we establish stronger intersectional collaborations among people working in social justice, people working in climate, people working with indigenous rights? I think all of these elements are so important, and we in the creative and cultural sectors can do so much more to help amplify them. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate in today's discussion. It's been a true honor, and I can't wait to continue the dialogue and collaborate with you in the future.
Bueno, hoy en día vivimos en un mundo complejo y que está en constante evolución. Un mundo en donde cuestiones como el cambio climático, el aumento de las desigualdades sociales, la disparidad en la transformación digital o el crecimiento urbano acelerado ponen en riesgo nuestros esfuerzos para alcanzar un futuro que sea más sostenible para todos. Este contexto finalmente nos exige formular modelos políticos que sean más transversales y sobre todo adaptables, que nos permitan proponer soluciones que sean holísticas, que se centren en las personas, en las comunidades, en el medio ambiente como un todo. Para lograr esto hay que reforzar las capacidades de adaptación de nuestros sistemas a través de una educación de calidad, que pueda ser relevante en sus contenidos, pero que también tome en cuenta el contexto y los desafíos que enfrentan las personas y también los países. Adoptada por la comunidad internacional en septiembre del año 2015, la Agenda 2030 reflejaba una visión transversal y proponía una hoja de ruta común, que proponía vínculos y sinergias entre diferentes ámbitos políticos para generar estrategias y políticas inclusivas, garantes de la justicia social y también de un verdadero desarrollo sostenible. La cultura se ve reflejada en muchos de los ODS. Explícitamente está en el objetivo 11, centrado en los asentamientos humanos, y en la meta 11.4, que consiste en intensificar los esfuerzos para proteger y salvaguardar el patrimonio cultural y natural del mundo. También está presente en el objetivo 4, que es centrado en la educación, y específicamente en la meta 4.7, destinada a garantizar que todos los alumnos adquieran los conocimientos y las aptitudes necesarios para promover el desarrollo sostenible, entre otras cosas, mediante la promoción de una cultura de paz y no violencia, la ciudadanía mundial y la valoración de la diversidad cultural. En este sentido, la cultura no debe considerarse como un ámbito político aislado de otros ámbitos políticos, sino más bien como una dimensión transversal que permite renovar la formulación de políticas públicas para responder a las aspiraciones de las diversas comunidades, así como garantizar el pluralismo y el respeto de los derechos fundamentales. Esta dimensión que nosotros llamamos transversal de la cultura se ve claramente reflejada en las convenciones y programas de cultura que aborda la UNESCO y que busca dar respuestas, o por lo menos pistas, a cuestiones como el cambio climático, la protección y salvaguardia de nuestra biodiversidad y la diversidad cultural, además del fomento de la creatividad para impulsar el empleo y la inclusión en la construcción de la paz a través de un diálogo intercultural. Pues bien, la justicia social y la equidad deben ser principios rectores en todo debate en torno al desarrollo sostenible. Nosotros, como comunidad internacional, sabemos que no podemos avanzar hacia un futuro más sostenible sin combatir la desigualdad por un lado, la discriminación y la exclusión. La cultura puede desempeñar un papel fundamental en la construcción de sociedades más justas e inclusivas. ya que las prácticas, los lugares y las expresiones culturales son elementos que claramente favorecen la inclusión social. Precisamente el artículo 27 de la Declaración Universal de los Derechos Humanos afirma que toda persona tiene derecho a tomar parte libremente en la vida cultural de la comunidad, a gozar de las artes y a participar en el progreso científico y en los beneficios que de él resulten. La Declaración sobre la Diversidad Cultural de 2001 reafirma este derecho y establece además que las personas de todas las culturas deben poder expresarse, darse a conocer y tener igualdad de acceso al arte y a los medios de expresión. La protección y la salvaguardia del patrimonio cultural y de la expresión en el patrimonio inmaterial, que son parte integrante de las convenciones de la UNESCO, ofrecen múltiples oportunidades para un diálogo participativo e inclusivo, reconociendo la diversidad cultural como un recurso, yo diría, positivo para la humanidad. Paralelamente, el acceso inclusivo a las instalaciones culturales, a los bienes culturales, contribuye a la vitalidad social y económica. La recomendación de la UNESCO de 2015 relativa a la protección y promoción de los museos y las colecciones destaca especialmente cómo los museos pueden también mejorar la inclusión social de las poblaciones más vulnerables. También podemos mencionar otros aspectos del sector que son igual de importantes y que también son vectores para la inclusión social. La industria cultural y creativa. Ellas no solamente generan alrededor de 30 millones de puestos de trabajo en todo el mundo, sino que también promueven la igualdad de género y dan más trabajo que cualquier otro sector a jóvenes entre 18 y 29 años. El turismo cultural, otro importante generador de empleo a nivel mundial, puede impulsar el desarrollo comunitario inclusivo, fomentando resiliencia, inclusión y empoderamiento de grupos más vulnerables, generando, por ejemplo, medios de vida económicos para las mujeres en zonas rurales o proveyendo medios de vida para las comunidades de pequeños estados insulares en desarrollo. Finalmente, es importante recordar que la diversidad cultural es tan necesaria para la humanidad como para la biodiversidad, para la naturaleza. Esta simbiosis entre cultura, biodiversidad y las comunidades, sobre la cual UNESCO hace hincapié, es fundamental para el desarrollo de la creatividad humana. Para garantizar el acceso a la cultura y fomentar comunidades más inclusivas y plurales, es fundamental, imprescindible, formular políticas culturales que sean más participativas a nivel nacional y que eso se refleje en el compromiso multilateral. Similarmente, para lograr una mayor justicia social, es muy importante adoptar un enfoque que sea más inclusivo y que tome en cuenta tanto el patrimonio cultural como la creatividad y la cultura en su conjunto. En este sentido, el diálogo y la cooperación internacional son los dos pilares esenciales para llevar adelante este tipo de diálogo y de debate.
Our panelists today include Dr. Tiwi Campos, who's a public official dedicated to the food culture of Mexico in the General Directorate of Popular, Indigenous, and Urban Cultures of the Ministry of Culture of the federal government. There's more information on her on the website. And joining her on this panel is Aluk Edwardson from the USA. She's a multidisciplinary artist and is an Inupiaq Norwegian Sami multidisciplinary artist born within the first moments of calm after one of the largest recorded storms in Alaska. I think it is important that I read that because it really sets context. Aluk also grew up playing along the shores of the Arctic Ocean that are now underwater, blame climate change. And similar to the shores that her grandparents lived by, they are now buried under waves far from the narrow spit of land, which they call now beach. Aluk started singing with birds that would perch themselves on the chimney of her childhood home before she learned to talk. That would tell you who Aluk is and what she now does. Again, more information about her is available on the website. And last, but by no means least, we have Anna Carla. She says not to call her daughter, so I'm saying Anna Carla as her request. She is a public administrator and economist, and she's a consultant and lecturer in 32 countries for the IDB and UNCTAD, the UNDP, and UNESCO. She's written many innovative books on cultural economy, creative economy, cities, and she's published several digital works, including Creative Economy as a Development Strategy, that was in 2008, and the following year, Creative City Perspectives. And we look forward certainly to the riveting discussion from these three phenomenal women. Go ahead, Aluk.
Okay. Ulvanga Aluk Edwardson, Utyaravig Miro Runga, Tagayoramiu, Kinuak Duritka, Ututkanat, Kuvert Manit Kuluri, Akara Debbie, Apara George, Akaluk, Susan, Surly, Kalafsuk, Apara, Eddie, Sully, David, Kuversoktonga, Ichkasirvasi. So thank you for allowing me to invite our elders to the space to aid us in this discussion. That's basically what I did and what I like to do for any cultural, especially cross-lateral cultural discussions. So for accessibility purposes, I am wearing a orange overcoat, and I have dark brown hair, and I'm sitting in a chair.
Well, thank you for that, Aluk. In African cultures, we also ask elders to for permission to speak, and then we invite the ancestors as well to clear the way and open the way. So thank you for that. Having heard the plenary session and in your respective context, how do we and our nations develop achievable agendas that profile diverse communities and voices in these important conversations?
Okay, fantastic. So my name is Ana Carla Fonseca. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Brazilian. I'm Caucasian, and I'm wearing glasses. I'm blondie, and I am wearing a dark blue overcoat. There's, a huge amount of books behind me in all different shelves. I sometimes just feel that I should live in a room where books can be my bed, my table, and my chair, because I really adore books. So you can get a feeling of the inspiration of the room I'm sitting in. I think that one of the most fascinating things for us to debate here, having the pleasure to have all of these three inspiring girls in the panel, is how we can actually take the policies and the debates and bring them to action, and take into account that I'm saying everything also in related being Brazilian. So we work a lot with different countries, but my main perspective obviously is of my own country, Brazil. And I think we are very much behind the things I've already seen in Aluk's website, and the conversations we have with Mexican colleagues, I can actually say the same about respect to indigenous cultures and the appreciation of their benefits to the whole societies. It's interesting because when I think of my childhood years, we have advanced a lot. So we now have many different books and, with different prizes, etc., written by indigenous people who can tell us the stories of their narratives, as we said in one of the presentations, and the whole storytelling, the cosmogony, trying to bring us to their context. And it's fascinating because I sometimes think, wow, had I learned this when I was a kid, it's my country. So I think we are opening up the doors and the windows of this country to indigenous understanding of the world, of the universe, but it's still very new to us. And we see the same situation, for instance, when we go to an exhibition of contemporary art, of indigenous contemporary artists, but we don't really have contemporary art galleries run by indigenous people. So I think that we are starting to consume, but it's very different to a step where these people will eventually be allowed or be given a chance to run their own businesses. So it's still very early years, in my understanding. And I think that one of the things we do need to guarantee to speed up this process is actually to put in place initiatives that can demonstrate the various cross-sector benefits of this understanding of the universe to the rest of society. And obviously, we're discussing here climate change and global challenges that we now have to face in a depth that is unseen. So I think that obviously when we understand the respect and the rights of the water, the mountain, and so forth, we can see a very close link to that. But being also an urbanist, I think that we can take the huge understanding and fabulous visions of the world to the city as well, to try to live the opportunities of undervalued classes in cities, especially in the outskirts of the cities, the favelas, the slums, trying to develop the whole city as a learning space based on a different understanding of the world. And some things like, you can work with public intervention, public art, but also work on the facades of the shops. You can try to turn the urban space into something that can be really inspiring and that can approach the whole society to this culture that's kind of floating over the country, but we need to connect to it. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm very privileged having access to these new books of old understandings and old cultures and the richnesses of it all. But I'm persuaded that 95% of Brazilians don't really have the same privilege I do. So I think that we need to do something that's really massive and open to the whole society and not just to groups of people who represent maybe 5% of the people living in the country.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Tiwi Campos, soy de México, originaria de la Ciudad de México, vengo de la Secretaría de Cultura, estoy en un cuarto blanco con una blusa mije bordada por compañeras oaxaqueñas, pues muy sentada, y aunque no hablo la lengua maya, de donde es mi familia, pues también puedo decir que parte de mi origen es en la cultura maya de la península de Yucatán, y me siento muy honrada estar aquí hoy por dos cosas, ¿no? Por poder contar las experiencias y las necesidades que el desarrollo comunitario que hemos realizado ya hace mucho tiempo me permite reflexionar sobre la pregunta y después de haber visto la sesión plenaria. ¿Cómo podemos desarrollar agendas sostenibles si, por ejemplo, en el caso de México, la mitad de la población está hoy viviendo inseguridad alimentaria? Más del 50% de la población tal vez hoy no va a comer, y eso me parece muy importante puntualizarlo antes de hablar de una agenda. ¿Cómo hablar de una agenda si la gente se está muriendo de hambre, ¿no? Y entonces eso me parece terrible, que debe ser todas las políticas públicas globales, nacionales y locales enfocadas a que la gente coma y que coma productos sanos, cercanos y soberanos, ¿no? No solo necesitamos comer, sino comer de acuerdo a nuestra cultura. En el caso de México, la cultura se sostiene en 68 pueblos indígenas, diversos pueblos afrodescendientes y muchos mestizos a los que, por ejemplo, yo pertenezco. Y lo que hace falta es la consulta, dejarlos de ver como sujetos sociales que solo necesitan ayuda y que son sujetos activos con experiencias, conocimiento y con una interacción social que puede modificar las prácticas. No los escuchamos, no les preguntamos, no sabemos cómo acercarnos a ellos para preguntarles no solo qué necesitas, sino cómo entre tus fuerzas y las mías podemos buscar objetivos alcanzables como los objetivos del desarrollo sostenible, pero enfocados a cada comunidad. Entonces, me parece muy importante que quienes son los tomadores de decisiones y quienes acompañamos a los tomadores de decisiones, poder buscar la forma de acercarnos no solo para preguntar qué necesitas, sino decir cómo me puedes ayudar a solucionar los grandes problemas que están no solo en nuestro país, en nuestra región, sino en el mundo entero, como son la recuperación de nuestras prácticas tradicionales, el cuidado de las semillas. México tiene en varias partes de sus latitudes trabajo con semillas donde hacemos murales. Hemos creado en este mes el Museo del Maíz. Las diversas culturas de México se sostienen sobre nuestra relación con el maíz y la milpa, la llamada dieta mesoamericana, pero si no los escuchamos no podemos no solo resolver nuestros problemas alimentarios y de salud, sino esta crisis de la modernidad que nos presenta diversos problemas de identidad. Entonces, para tener agendas sostenibles, lo primero, lo más importante, y es una política de gobierno y es una política de vida, escuchar y darle, y que la gente tenga que comer. Y no es regalar, sino permitir desarrollar sus proyectos para que puedan comer, para que puedan expresar y ser escuchados, y nosotros quienes estamos en las tomas de decisiones, aprender a escuchar. Porque si eso algo hemos perdido, es la posibilidad de la escucha, saber qué piensa el otro sobre un problema. Y esos problemas que les decimos, si a los problemas los catalogamos como problemas estructurales, nunca los vamos a poder resolver. Son problemas que debemos de resolver, que no están en la estructura. Nadie debe volver a padecer hambre para poder de verdad crear agendas. Por eso me parece una prioridad y que todas las voces de todas las diversas comunidades sean escuchadas. Eso tendría yo que decir de la pregunta número 1. Gracias.
That means good to hear about both of your responses, Ana Carla and Chiwi. My name is hard to pronounce, and so I'm the worst at pronouncing other people's names. I'm Aluk. I'm wearing an orange overcoat, sitting in a chair with long dark hair, and I have a virtual background behind me of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is part of the tribal lands from where I come from. So yeah, this is a fascinating question, and man, your guys' responses really got me thinking. So much for your insight. Koinakbak means big things. Both of you talked about two very interconnected things, right? Food security and city spaces. You know, these learning spaces that Ana Carla talked about. You know, and I'm thinking, you know, from my personal Indigenous perspective about re-understanding, not reimagining, but re-understanding how our urban spaces, our rural spaces, all are Indigenous land. And so I agree, public spaces, public art, but just the whole, like a massive, as you mentioned, a massive re-understanding that the very ground, it's not to me that we need an integration of Indigenous culture. To me, I think we need a refounding, because honestly, for thousands and thousands of years, it was Indigenous knowledge that got us through. And we all, if you go back far enough, are Indigenous. All people really are. We come from cultures of foraging, berry picking, hunter cultures that are connected to the land. And so, you know, connecting these points with food sustainability, I grew up in a community that had a lot of traditional subsistence foods, right? So we went whaling, we went caribou hunting and fishing. I grew up learning how to cut up a caribou before I learned the alphabet. And so, you know, very, very much connected to our food. And wouldn't it be an interesting thing if in our urban communities, instead of sourcing most of our food outside, we re-understood how to use the very land we stand on? And so, you know, this whole concept of a city being reimagined. Why are the houses all clustered together in one spot and all the businesses in another? Like how can we re-understand so that we don't have to reach outward for what we need, like food, the basics. In terms of policy, for me, I'm a storyteller, right? I'm a multidisciplinary artist, as was mentioned in the beginning, the founder and director of Creative Decolonization. and the artistic director for Bright Shores, which is a nonprofit effort in the North that really takes, talk about dialogue to action. Up where I come from, there's a whole lot of political and social challenges having to do with pain of the planet body and pain of the human body. So yes, environmental challenges like oil development in Anwar, right? But also suicide, abuse, addiction, these different things. And in my mind, as an Indigenous person, these are connected. The way you treat the body, the way you treat the land, right? And so I really feel like there's a lot of opportunity to re-understand from a policy standpoint, working with individuals to tell the story. I think storytelling itself is not only an education, but it's action-oriented. When you tell a story, you're creating a space for people to explore ideas and having conversations after that. So that's how I would answer that one as a storyteller.
Thank you for your responses, panelists. And it really leads directly into the second question. In your professional roles, what are the key factors at play in ensuring that cultural, artistic, and environmental diversity thrives? You come from 3 different backgrounds, and I'm sure there'll be a synergy in your responses.
Let's hope so.
We don't have a lot of time, so we have to keep our responses brief.
Okay.
One more question.
Okay, right. So, well, speaking from my experience here in Brazil, and I think that in South America in general, one of the key things is actually to understand that when we include projects and initiatives from indigenous people, we get rid of the stigma that we're giving something to them because we have to, because it's good, it's greenwashing, it's whatever. And I think that we need to turn this into, again, the understanding of the benefits we get when we have a different perspective of the world and in face of the complex challenges we need to face, we need to overcome. So, for instance, if we talk a lot about economic impact, about urban impact of culture, the economic impact of culture, the urban regeneration propelled by culture and so forth. But I think there's much more in there, because when we start to understand that, again, the connections we have to the relationships in cities, to the respect to the rural areas, to the fact that obviously if you don't pollute the water, you're gonna have water, you won't be running out of water, polluted air, and the trees and everything. I think that we're actually gonna have to eventually realize that we are learning much more than we're giving. And one of the key things in my understanding is basically to raise this awareness that we're including this project, these initiatives, and these people, not because we have to, because, we've destroyed everything, so let's give them 2% of what we currently have, but actually because we desperately need to have different perspectives to the world. Otherwise, we're not going to get out of the situation we put ourselves into. So I think it's actually this flipping point between the stigma of having to do something and the understanding that we are getting huge benefits from a different understanding.
Thank you, Ana Carla. Let's take in the next.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Me parece muy importante la pregunta número 2, porque las funciones profesionales me impactan un poco en el sentido, en el caso de México, que la formación, yo vengo de una universidad pública, de la UNAM, estudié ahí la licenciatura, el maestría y el doctorado, pero ahí, aunque es la Universidad Nacional, no estamos enfocados a resolver los problemas desde la diversidad cultural. Tenemos planes y programas de estudio que no nos permiten, bueno, sí nos permiten, pero al acercarnos a la realidad, no van a la par. Una de las cuestiones más importantes que hemos aprendido dentro de la universidad, de la función profesional y la experiencia comunitaria, es que a partir del siglo pasado, cuando cambiaron las políticas ambientales, pusieron al ser humano como dueño y no parte de la naturaleza. En el momento que empezamos a entender que somos parte de todo un ecosistema natural, que somos una parte más de este ecosistema, nos dimos cuenta que ese es el eslabón que nos falta para promover de manera justa y equitativa la diversidad cultural. La diversidad, por ejemplo, en casos como países como el mío, donde tenemos 68 pueblos indígenas, hablar de diversidad cultural, ningún pueblo se parece, ni los que derivan de la misma lengua o todos son distintos, todos venden distintos sus alimentos, todos se relacionan distinto, todos piden permiso distinto a la madre naturaleza para cortar un árbol, para sembrar algo. Entonces, la clave me parece muy importante es permitir que desde las políticas públicas, desde las más nacionales, estatales y locales, se garantice la participación, la consulta ciudadana, que si ahorita tenemos megaproyectos que se están construyendo en el país y que necesitamos saber qué opinan los pueblos y las comunidades sobre los proyectos, que si ellos deciden que entran, que se construyan, que sea una decisión informada, consensuada y traducida a sus lenguas. No podemos, y si solamente es mediante el diálogo, pues que tengamos siempre un intérprete de cada una de las lenguas que participen en los proyectos. Si no garantizamos que la información llegue fluida, de manera clara, precisa, no vamos a poder garantizar la prosperidad de la diversidad cultural. La valoración artística desde hace mucho tiempo debe ser encaminada a cómo nos relacionamos con la naturaleza, cómo le cantamos, cómo le construimos, cómo la interpretamos, cómo la abordamos. Por ejemplo, en el caso de la blusa que hoy traigo, tiene una interpretación de nuestra relación con la naturaleza. Tenemos que poner dentro de un mismo eje la valoración artística occidental, tanto de los pueblos indígenas como de los pueblos porque todas es valiosa. Entonces, si ponemos encima o como prioridad una respuesta, no vamos a poder lograr acercarnos y a partir de las similitudes o las igualdades, vamos a poder construir factores clave que nos permitan ese desarrollo. Necesitamos que la diversidad cultural no solo sea un discurso gubernamental, sino que sea una práctica comunitaria, una práctica social, como lo que está pasando hoy aquí en este foro, por ejemplo, ¿no? Que todos tenemos las mismas oportunidades, las mismas posibilidades de expresión y pero esto no pasa en nuestros países. Entonces, para poder prosperar, necesitamos garantizar la consulta, la participación, el enfoque a futuro de las comunidades y tener a la madre naturaleza como un eje fundamental de conservación para poder lograrlo. Si no nos ponemos parte y dentro de un sistema, no vamos a garantizar nada. Tan es así que estamos en una situación inminente de peligro con el cambio climático y nadie ni nada podrá detenerlo. Sería esa mi participación de la pregunta 2.
Yeah, I really, the second question resonates with what I do on a daily basis. So Bright Shores, which is an organization I mentioned before, there's two, Creative Decolonization and Bright Shores, funds and produces creative teams of Indigenous artists, particularly Inuit artists, as that's where I come from, the North, to bring different stories to life about the land, sea, or sovereignty. And by doing this, we're funding, it's a regenerative economic initiative that we're trying out here. We've got funding to pay storytellers, pay cultural advisors, to pay people to share the stories. So that's one aspect of regenerative economy. Another thing that we've been talking about is bringing back reindeer herding. Right? So these are examples of where the cross sections, right? One of our panelists talked about culture being the cross section. And it is a bit of a cross section. It intersects with everything that you do and everything that you are. I also think it's the power underneath what we do. So those are some of the responses, like, you know, when people think, but also I really want to bring storytelling to the forefront because we talk about dialogue to action. And, you know, I was talking to my mom about this topic this morning, and she was like, you know, so many of us are sick about talking about things. We've had so many roundtables, so many board meetings, so many community town halls. And so that's something that about, 10 years ago, really, actually longer than that, about 15 years ago, I started to look at seriously as a professional opportunity, not just for myself, but for other people, of, okay, how can we take this energy How can we take this dialogue and what can we do with it? And for me, my niche is storytelling. So there's filmmaking and theater and spoken word and poetry and stuff like that. But for other people, it could be all kinds of avenues that aren't just talking. Because also, I feel like there's a lot of indigenous cultures that definitely have roundtable discussions, but there's also active talking, active doing. You're sewing, you're hunting, you're walking, you're cooking, right? You're not just sitting around a table talking an issue to death, which is not what we're doing by any means. But I feel like probably everyone in this call has been there before. So talking about that second and first question, policy to action and how do you amplify diverse voices, I think it's through the stories. Storytelling is our first form of education. It's how we learned what we know today as humans. Anyway, I'll get off, but that's my thoughts on it.
No, that's fantastic. It's all about sharing, which brings me to this question that we were discussing before off camera. How do we sustain now the social justice discussion within our communities? We each do what we do within our respective spheres, but how do we sustain it within our communities to achieve the change where it is needed?
Okay, should we take the same sequence then? Okay, I'll start. I think that first we need to stop thinking as us and them, which is something that's very rational, and I think that's very much fostered by specific groups that are interested in us against them theory. And the reason I'm saying that is that obviously when we work with huge companies in mining, in oil, and in commodities, etc., it's obviously natural that we think of them as commodities that the land is giving us, and I'm living here in my interesting apartment in front of the park, and I have a completely different life to the one that my co-nationals are living in different areas of the country. So if we stop doing that and start thinking that, as Alok said before, okay, this is basically land that used to be the Atlantic forest, and obviously the tree that is in front of my house is still a reminiscence of what we had before. How we start reconnecting, I think that we'll start also reconnecting to our connationals, because there's no way we can actually think of a system if we have split pieces of this puzzle. We need to make sure that we see ourselves as complementary colors. And through all different initiatives, like I was checking out Cheekbone Cosmetics in Canada and other initiatives. So companies that produce products based on traditional knowledge, and I, not being majority from an indigenous background, can benefit from this knowledge. Wow, fantastic. So I started learning that the small herb in front of my house is actually a traditional food from the forest. When I start understanding that my universe is enhancing, expanding, and I'm learning new things from my own house, thanks to the views of other people who live in the country, I think this is when we start connecting. It's obviously a process, but I think that if we are to turn sustainable development into regeneration, because we are beyond the turning point, we do need to start leveraging this understanding more and more, both in huge cities like my hometown, São Paulo, and indigenous areas in the middle of the Amazon. We need to reconnect definitely with respect to each of the parts.
Bueno, la justicia social me parece que está viva, ¿no? La búsqueda del cumplimiento de los derechos humanos de todas las personas en el planeta sigue en pie. Y cuando hablamos de justicia social, aunque yo lo tomé como bandera al principio de la alimentación, es el derecho a ser felices, el derecho a recibir amor, el derecho a tener un medio ambiente donde podamos convivir y pensar en un presente digno y un futuro digno para las siguientes generaciones. Las comunidades hablo del caso mexicano porque obviamente es el que me pulsa en el corazón. Dentro de nuestras comunidades, dentro de las comunidades, debemos aprender a escuchar y saber cuáles son las necesidades de las personas que habitan a cada uno de los. Hay necesidades generales, pero para poder hacer un cambio de sistema, debemos participar todos en la construcción de este cambio de sistema. Ojalá estemos en esta coyuntura que nos permita generar estos cambios, pero hemos llegado al límite de todos los problemas que tenemos sociales, ambientales, culturales, el racismo, que creo que es muy importante en el caso mexicano. El racismo interno es muy fuerte y debemos de mencionarlo y seguirlo plasmando dentro de la lucha por la justicia social. Todos los seres humanos, todas las personas somos exactamente iguales y mientras no tengamos plasmado eso dentro de la estructura política, no vamos a poder iniciar un cambio. Aún así, sin el apoyo gubernamental, en cada una de las comunidades vemos una forma distinta de tratar a la madre naturaleza, vemos una forma distinta de pensar los alimentos, de compartir, de generar nuevos alimentos para todos los miembros de la comunidad. Y entonces, a partir de ahí, ese es el gran reto, cómo lo comunitario lo podemos pensar y generar global. Cómo a partir de las experiencias de cómo se siembra, perdón que retome el maíz, pero en México el maíz es la base fundamental de nuestra alimentación, de nuestra vida, de nuestra comunicación. Comemos, creo que 300 kilos de maíz al año, todos los mexicanos. Entonces, bueno, el maíz siempre está entre todas nuestras acciones en nuestra vida cultural, comunitaria, económica. No podemos pensar en una lucha por una cultura digna si la gente no recibe un salario digno. ¿Cómo podemos luchar por la soberanía alimentaria en un discurso si las mujeres u hombres de las comunidades tienen que caminar 2 kilómetros para ir por un poco de agua más o menos limpia? Entonces tenemos que generar la búsqueda de las respuestas desde una búsqueda global de las necesidades. Si entendemos eso, la justicia global se empieza a construir, la estamos construyendo. Y tal vez las comunidades, si los que estamos en la toma de decisiones, ni los que estamos en las universidades o dirigimos cualquier grupo, ¿no? La justicia social se construye todos los días, paso a pasito, y entonces, al momento que aprendemos a mirar y ver lo que podemos hacer en conjunto, buscando no solo las respuestas culturales, sino de derechos humanos y de justicia social, el cambio de sistemas va a estar más cerca de lo que nosotros pensamos. Muchas gracias.
Yeah, when I think about sustainability, I think about balance. And I agree that, in a lot of the communities around the world, we've reached our limits. And I know in my home community, there's a lot of lateral violence. There's a lot of internal racism and the environmental movement and the indigenous movement, at least where I come from, are polarized as well. And so there are different ways that your identity can be stigmatized as a person, as an indigenous person, or as a person living in an urban area. I think going back to sustainability and balance within social justice, I think listening to those needs and facing it with solutions that are focused on wellness and healing. Because, as I mentioned, pain of the body, pain of the human body, pain of the planet body. And so when I think about sustainability and in the work that I do, everything that I do is with trauma-informed care practices, for instance, because I know that the communities that we're going into, and I have a teaching background, so I use social emotional learning practices as well. And I know that, the communities that Bright Shores and Creative Decolonization are working with are dealing with internal oppression, external oppression, environmental oppression, and cultural loss, but also cultural revitalization. So for me, sustainability is about incorporating wellness practices with what we're doing already. And also storytelling itself is a healing practice as well as an educational practice. And so the manner in which we approach our creative productions for storytelling is with the approach of healing for sustainability purposes so that we can continue the discussion beyond generations. And the other thing I think to say about sustainability within the projects that we're working on at the urban level, at the rural level, within multiple communities coming together, I think one of the big things is not having one-offs, right? is investing in the communities that we're working with. So that's a big thing that I hear from the people that I work with, and what we don't do. We don't just come in for a quick workshop. We're just like, we're just here to hear what you have to say, tell your stories and bye, right? Because the work is bigger than that, and sustainability is bigger than that.
Thank you very much for that, Alu, and thank you, Ana Carla. Thank you, TV. It seems as though we are all of one accord in thinking and feeling that we've reached our limit. And Ana Carla, you posed a very key question. In this world of so many disparities and division, how can we talk the talk and make it action? That's a critical question that I hope will come out in some of the other sessions in this conference. And TV, you highlighted grave inequalities that exist within Mexico, but are certainly mirrored around other countries in the world. And how can we have dialogues like these when we know that people are still hungry and need to walk however far to get clean water? You know, dialogues like this become meaningless if those kinds of inequalities and inequities continue. So and I like how you have used your example to say that everybody must be included in the discussion and the decision making. That is so critical. And Alu, you challenged us to look at to re-understand the way we look at this world that we have created, and especially the way we construct cities, which by their nature take us away from the land. And TV, I think it was you who pointed out that we as humans, we have removed ourselves as part of the economy, the ecology, and made ourselves owners of it. I think that's a very critical point. And if we think about that, you know, we are part of it. So we shouldn't separate and own, you know, and it makes me think, we the planet, we are the world, we are the planet. We must therefore care for it and care for each other. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you everyone for participating. And I hope that we have a very successful summit in which we stop talking and do more acting.
Welcome back from your breakout sessions. Hope you all had a series of productive conversations. I do want to let you know that Chef Jose Andres regrets he will not be able to participate, as he and his World Central Kitchen team are providing much needed assistance on the Spanish island of La Palma, where a volcanic eruption has destroyed thousands of homes and upended countless lives. We wish him the best, and we truly applaud his efforts. We do have, however, a wonderful musical piece to share with you right now, courtesy of our friends at Playing for Change. You will be happy to see it, trust me, and you may recognize a familiar face or two. Here to introduce the video is Executive Director Jake Groshong at Playing for Change. Thank you.
Hello, this is Jake Groshong. I'm the Executive Director of the Playing for Change Foundation. I really appreciate this opportunity to share our work with the Americas Cultural Summit. A special thanks to the National Endowment for the Arts for pulling all this together. I'm here to share one of our most recent videos done around International Peace Day. I think with so much going on in the world, we can make some time for everyone to get on the peace train. Please enjoy. Music builds bridges. Music is the key. Have a great conference.
Now I've been happy lately, thinking about good things to come, and I believe it could be something good has begun.
Oh, I've been smiling lately, dreaming about the world as one, and I believe it could be someday it's gonna come.
'Cause I'm on the edge of darkness, and there rides the peace train. Oh, peace train, take this country, come take me home again.
Now I've been smiling lately, thinking about the good things to come,
Crying lately, thinking about the world as it is. Why must we go on hating? Why can't we live in bliss? Peace train sounding loud, glide on the peace train.
Jump upon the peace train. Ooh, ah, yeah, ooh, ah.
Come on, come on, come on.
Come on around
Sounding loud.
on the peace train.
On the peace train. On the peace train. Ooh, ah, yeah, ooh, ah.
Come on, come on, come on. Let's come on, peace train.
Come on, come on, come on. Peace train.
Come on, join me. I'm jumping on the peace train. Come on, peace train.
Peace train.
What a beautiful song and video. Thank you to our friends at Playing for Change. Who's ready to get on the peace train? I am feeling so uplifted from today's conversations that started with such a thoughtful keynote from Secretary Deb Haaland, and this was just a perfect way to end it all. I'm really looking forward to day 3 of the conference. We're going to hear from so many great colleagues, including an opening keynote from Mark Bamuthi Joseph and some words from Kevin Gover, our Undersecretary for Museums and Culture at the Smithsonian. On behalf of the National Endowment for the Arts and our friends at Ithaca, we truly appreciate you being here, and your participation in the breakout sessions today was really fantastic. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow, day 3 of the conference, as we dive deeper into conversations around diversity and inclusion. Until then, see you tomorrow, everybody. Hasta mañana.